Hi everyone, it's Lisa Clinical Wizard. We are right here in Kharkiv with Sarah Ashton Cirillo, and we are going to discuss very interesting topic about Russian propaganda machine and our war in Ukraine. Sarah, do you know the journalist Mattia Sorbi, Italian journalist?
I do know him, and he and I crossed paths many times here in Kharkiv, and his disappearance came as a great shock, and his reappearance today in a video from the Russian Ministry of Defense came as a greater shock, although I think I speak for everyone to be grateful that he's alive as a human being.
Mattia has been reported as missing since 31st of August because he was on his way from Mykolaiv region to Kherson region to do the reportage about what?
He was interesting in the sense that he prided himself on being an old school journalist. And that caused some very interesting discussions between me and Mattia, including the fact that he worked for the Russian Ministry of Defense as a television correspondent in 2014 from occupied Donetsk. And I used to tell him, how could you be neutral in this engagement when the Ukrainians accredited you as champions of free speech, despite the fact that you literally worked for the Russians during this war? And he would laugh it off, because he would say, you know what? I don't get involved with soldiers. I don't get involved with the military-industrial complex. I just want to report. The Russians are okay with it. The Ukrainians are okay with it. I personally wasn't okay with it, but I respected him enough that when we would have coffee together, despite the fact of his extreme right-wing views, to the point that he's been called by certain communications ministries a homophobe, I was able to communicate with him because he understood how to separate being a journalist and his personal views and his feelings of neutrality in this war with what it meant to be a journalist. And that's what made it okay for me to be associating with him, despite the fact that we were in a war zone and he had questions about the Ukrainian side.
Okay. And I also heard that he was a long-term journalist reporting from Kharkiv. Why did he change his direction of his geography? Why did he decide to go there?
I'm laughing because I'll never forget our last conversation. Again, despite the fact that he was very traditional, very conservative, and extremely open to the Russian positions, he was a champion of speech. And that's why it was okay that he was here in Ukraine and we would talk together, because this is a nation, Ukraine is a nation that champions liberty and speech. And he said, Sarah, the weather has changed. I'm going south. I'm going to Odessa. I said, what's in Odessa? He said, it's better in the south, and you never know the people you're going to meet down there and the stories you're going to find. I said, this is my city. Kharkiv is my city, and I'm not leaving. He said, well, you're going to miss out, and maybe I'll see you in the winter when the weather changes back again and there's no point in being down there. I didn't believe that that was going to be our last conversation, and I hope it wasn't our last conversation.
When is your last conversation usually with people?
You've lived in this war as well as I have, and I think one thing we all value is family. And what he used to talk about more than anything was his desire to be around the people who cared for him and the culture that he loved, and that was the Italian culture. This man was everything people could imagine about Italians. And all I hope for is that he's released from the hospital directly to Italy. He can recuperate among people who understand him, who love him, who care for him, and then he can get back out to the front lines reporting. But I am certain that whatever happened, it was not the way the Russian Ministry of Defense talked about it. There's no way he would have been associated with the armed forces of Ukraine in a border region. It just would not have happened, especially considering the fact that he was quite disdainful, as I mentioned, of all the military sides, because he felt it took away from his positioning as a journalist.
What do you think can be done by us, by the colleagues, by the community of journalists, and maybe some local politicians who are responsible for the Kherson region? How can we set him free? And how can we get in contact with him?
From sources, I know that the Russian leadership in the occupied areas are in contact with Italian authorities. So this is processing in the way that the Italians themselves need to be engaged. From Ukraine, as his colleagues, we need to keep this in the news, and we need to tell the Russians, don't be putting injured journalists on camera. This goes against everything that they claim they're for, which is not to engage in propaganda. Whether the story is what they wrote, which it's not, or the story is exactly what I'm telling you, which it is that he was a man who worked for the Russians, he shouldn't be on camera. Do you know who is on camera? This beautiful little doggy who came over. Oh my God.
The child of the war.
Yes.
She was born in the Mykolaiv region, and we adopted her from one of the villages liberated in the Mykolaiv region, Batsky.
So, speaking of Mykolaiv, what we really want is for people not to forget that Ukraine is a nation of individual rights, liberty, and free speech. And again, if Mattia Sorbi was able to work for the Russians, which he did, and was still welcome in Ukraine, I think that says more about the situation than any video that the Russian Ministry of Defense could put up about the situation.
I agree, and free speech doesn't come for free, it has to be defended.
Well, as a journalist, Mattia Sorbi was defending free speech. As a nation, Ukraine defends free speech, and we as his colleagues and fellow journalists must continue in that light until he's free.
Agree. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening. Please feel free to share if you are for the free journalism and for the freedom of speech. And we're sending you a lot of love from invincible Kharkiv, from our beautiful country, Ukraine. And
thank you, Lisa, Clinical Wizard, Sarah Ashton, and I'm sure there's more to come on this story.
yeah, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!